Coming down with the heartache.
In this episode of Between Two Beers, we talk to Roger Wilkinson. Rog is a Kiwi football legend and arguably Waikato football's best ever coach. After a professional playing career was cut short by injury, Rog earned his full English coaching badge by the time he was 22, before blazing a trail across New Zealand football, with successful stints at Seaton, Napier City Rovers, Claudelands Rovers, Auckland City and Waikato FC. But Waikato United was his major legacy at club level. Under Rog, the Bulls won the Chatham Cup the first time they entered, and were National League runners-up in 92 and 95, and beaten Cup finalists in 92. In the 90s, Waikato were never out of the top four under his watch, and he built a team with a fearsome reputation. In 92, he was named New Zealand Coach of the Year. In 2003, he was New Zealand's Director of Coaching. Today, aged 74, Rog can still be found out on the grass 5 times a week, coaching Waikato's most talented juniors with Melville United. Again, total legend. In this episode, we talk about his most memorable and fiery sideline confrontations, why Chris Wood made it when many other talented young Kiwis have failed, why his son Sam never made it as a player, where the relentless joke-telling comes from, and why his Hamilton soccer shop never quite made it. We invited Sam to guest host this episode, and some of the introspection and reflection between the two was pretty special. For show notes, links to listen, and an epic Rog biography, visit betweentwobeers.com. If you like what we're doing and want to support the show for a cup of coffee a month, click the link to our Patreon page. Many thanks to those already on board. Enjoy the app.
Coming down with the heartache.
Roger Wilkinson, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Is this your first podcast?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Exciting times. We had Paul Nixon on as our second guest, and he'd never been on a podcast or knew what a podcast was. Now he's a huge fan, so maybe you'll be a convert to listening to podcasts and being on them in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I will. I think it's very interesting, and it's going to be quite a good experience. And if you can push Nico through it, then I know that I've got a good chance.
Exciting. We're recording this one at Chartwell at Roger's son Sam Wilkinson's house, and for the first time in Between Two Beers history, we have invited a guest host along. So Sam, welcome to Between Two Beers with Roger Wilkinson.
Thank you, very honoured. Repeat guest, first father-son duo. Second.
Yeah. Well, we kind of like the vibe with the Bruce Holloway,
nice.
Steve Holloway a few weeks ago, so we thought we'd try it out again. We didn't plan it this way, but it was almost a year to the day where we had you on the podcast. Roger, did you listen to Sam's episode?
I didn't, no.
Nah, you wouldn't waste your time.
Did not know how to access a podcast at that stage.
But can you revisit them and listen to them?
You can. That's something you can do.
I'm going to revisit them.
That's an option.
Can I also just add in that Dad turned up in his full Melville gear because he thought this has been filmed.
Some of them are filmed.
They are, but that is the level, I guess, of podcast interaction.
Some of them are filmed.
Some of them are filmed.
I'm out of it.
That's a good move. That's a professional. He's an old pro. Shay, let me bring you in. Should we get started?
Yeah, let's get started. It's almost a theme now, a Wilkinson Christmas. So I guess next year we'll bring another podcast host on, Katie Wilkinson.
Super creative.
She's not called
we'll shout out
Wilkinson anymore. So I killed it.
Yeah, didn't name it.
Forget it then. We won't bring her on.
Anyway, let's crack on. Shay, how do you know Roger Wilkinson?
I have a vivid recollection of the first time I came across Rog, and it was at Galloway Park. I reckon it was 2000, and it was a coaching course, and I'd been invited as a player on it. And the first thing I remember was Roger calling Philip Raffin, for those of you Waikato tragics that remember that name. Rog said he moved like a pregnant hippo, and I was shocked to my core that was said, and that was kind of the legend of Roger Wilkinson. I think I was kind of a little bit afraid at that stage. Straight out of high school, he coached Hillcrest High in some games which we won't talk about because we won't talk about secondary schools football in the late 90s. There's no point bringing that up.
No, don't need to.
But that was my first real interaction with Roger Wilkinson. He probably coached you earlier, Stephen?
Yeah, Rog was a real central part of my sort of football upbringing. A lot of centre of excellence, a lot of morning sessions. I played for Wanderers under Rog. I played for Waikato under Rog. There are some things you remember, and I haven't been coached by him in many years, but it still strike me, very strongly, is that it was the your big girl's blouse, put out your hand, naughty, and I hope we don't ever have to go to war because if it's you lot fighting, we're all fucked. It was kind of like he did have that sort of intimidation factor about him. And the one thing I do remember about playing was you were always aware of Rog. Rog was kind of he was the man in Waikato football, and you'd always be aware if he was watching you. I felt like I'd always try to be a little bit better because if I knew Rog was watching, which I think is probably a testament to the status you held amongst the youth.
Yes, thank you very much. But it's funny, you learn as a coach. So in those days, it was very intense. I'd come through the English system, which was, if you think that I would say the wrong things, then if you'd have been at Notts Forest with Brian Clough, then you'd have thought, hey, Roger's a bit of a pansy, because, I can remember Luton Town Youth, we played one game, Ted Duggan, the youth coach, came in at half time, came up to me, slapped me round the head 3 times and said, if you ever pass back when you could have passed forwards, you'll get my fists instead of my hand. So that was what you were brought up with. So I wasn't as bad as that, obviously, but very intense.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on a lot of that sort of changing of the culture and how your coaching adapted, throughout the years. I actually want to start and give, for those who don't know Roger, a little bit of an overview on...
Well, how does Sam know Roger?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Sam, how do you know?
He's my dad.
Oh,
Yeah.
Coach, have you coached you?
Coached me consistently from 4 through till
36.
26, and then became career advisor / life coach / nitpicker / everything. So father also a huge part of my career and my life, obviously. So
yeah, it was a fascinating dynamic where the sort of coaching journeys crossed. I think you both coached in Chatham Cup final last year with Napier, and Rog did the same thing. Was it 20 years before or something?
Yeah, he's won it. I haven't, but definitely some parallels in the journey. I think actually the only time we've crossed opposite dugouts was Napier tournament a few years ago. You with Fencibles under 19s, me with Melbourne. We beat you 3-1. So if there was ever a passing of the guard, I'd like to think that was the moment I overtook you. So.
Junior 1, Senior 0. Right, so as we tend to do on Between Two Beers, we've gone to Bruce Holloway for all footballing matters, and I asked him to write a bio on Rod, just a snappy little picture of what he was like during his glory days and what he achieved. He wrote about 2,000 words, but I've just trimmed it down, but I will post the full biography on Between Two Beers website. So for those who are listening who want to go and read it, it's very good. So he says, utter the name Roger in New Zealand football circles, and the chances are anybody who has been around the game for any length of time will instantly know who you're talking about. That's the measure of Roger Wilkinson's influence on the code. In the New Zealand environment, football coaches are larger than life. They determine a club's ambition, style and personality. The coach is the mirror where a club looks itself in the face. Most coaches have a burning passion. At his peak, Wilkinson was the epitome of all that and more, with the added dimension of dynamism with a dash of ruthlessness. Roger probably did more to shape the game in the Waikato in the modern era than anyone, not just from a coaching perspective, but in terms of administration, fundraising, pre-pokies, sponsorship and profile. It helped that he had the vision thing. He saw situations not as they were, but as what they could be. He was the ultimate battler, often doing the most with the least. Roger's Waikato legacy is one of many highs, occasional lows, a smattering of controversies, and an era that was never dull. Away from football, he could be affable and eloquent. He was a master salesman, great speaker, and an influential voice in administrative matters. but anywhere near a coaching dugout, and he was invariably agitated, an excitable, cursing firebrand focused on his team and the game he loves. Even when he was between jobs, Wilkinson was a restless, driven soul, the ultimate football junkie. You could find him at parks giving unsolicited advice to youngsters, talking shop with adults, or cracking madcap jokes. In '93, Rog told me, if you're not fully committed to the game, if you're not fully committed, the game will wear you down. And New Zealand is littered with coaches who have either given it away or settled for coaching at a safer, lower level. But I am a driven coach. Wilkinson had his fair share of critics. His forthright manner and tendency to speak his mind, especially when handed a microphone, always grated with administrators, and he was particularly feisty in his younger days. In summary, Roger was Waikato's Mr. Football for a generation, though in retrospect, if he had an Achilles heel, it was that he was unable to take enough football people with him in search of greatness. Again, you find that hard to believe. That's an edited down version of what he's written. But Rog, does that... I know you've read the full thing as well. Is that a fair picture of the personality you were and how you look back on your time as Waikato's perhaps greatest coach?
Yes, well, the advantage for Waikato was that I'd had other experiences that sort of I learnt from, because I've always been a little bit naive. I always used to think everybody would join in with me. It's common sense. You're trying to build the club. You're trying to make things good. But what I never realised was that other people are not involved for that meaning. They're involved because for other reasons, and often it isn't a burning desire to push the club on. And the other thing was coming into the Waikato, which was fortunate because I'd learnt at C2 and I'd got my full badge, UEFA A in England. I was a young full badge, and I got it while I was still playing. But I thought, because I could coach my way out of a paper bag, I thought I was Mr. Brilliant. And going into C2, and what I learnt was, no matter how well I coached, you need players. You know, you look at Ferguson, that sort of group from '82, those were the ones that made him. And same with Barcelona with Messi. And so when I went into Napier, then up to Waikato, I'd had that learning experience. Also, at Napier, what I did was I brought in a lad, Colin Stone, from Wimbledon, who'd come out and what have you. So we reflected what they were doing in England. You had a full-time fundraiser, and we actually had our own lotto tickets.
Yeah.
Okay. And then coming up here, again, luckily, with Terry Finley, he was a successful businessman at that time, and so I could just concentrate on the coaching.
Yeah, we're having coffee this morning talking about this episode, and we were like, there's so much to cover. You've done so much in coaching, and there's so many incredible stories. But what stands out to you as the proudest moments, or the achievements you honour the highest across your coaching career in New Zealand?
Well, obviously winning the Chatham Cup for Waikato, because it was an event. But also the fact that that group of players, I don't think we were outside the top 5 in the National League, and everything had been falling apart for Hamilton, and we'd managed to get together. So we were always there, pushing it, working it, and I think in my last season we came second. We're a little bit unlucky with sort of results. So, I really sort of felt good about that. And
just on that Waikato team then, Bruce mentioned it in his thesis about how the coach is the mirror of the club. Did those players take your characteristics on when they went on the pitch, or were they quite an eclectic group of individuals, or what did that group look like? I
could take sort of credit for it, but in some ways you're a little bit lucky. What I did have was the right people at the right time. Darren Melville, we got him in from Newcastle United. I mean, when I went to sign him, he'd answered, because I used to put adverts in the North East Press. And when I went to sign Darren, he came down to my father's apartment in St Albans. And the first thing he said was, God, this is a bit pokey, try and impress me. But I mean, that was Darren, hell of a character. And funny enough, but the reason I got him was I'd actually got a lad who was in some ways as good, even better, a lad called David King, who I'd brought out from Derby County. And but his girlfriend didn't settle, so in the end I had to replace him. I brought Melv out, and he was a character, not only on the pitch but off. And then you've got Brian Hayes, a Liverpudlian. I mean, have you ever been to Liverpool?
No, not lucky enough.
No, even the police dogs go round in pairs, But,
there we go. Now we're starting. I wonder, what are we? 14 minutes in the first one-liner.
But I mean, Hazy was a terrific character, and he was our Roy Keane. He got around and got things going, and and then I was fortunate enough to have a lot of local lads as well. I mean, Paul Gemmell moved back from Manurewa. He'd played for them. Now, Gemmell should have been a bloody all-white, because he was great. He could play right back. He played centre back for me, because although he was only 5'9" or 5'10", he could jump. I often played him in midfield if we were stuck. He'd go in there, do the job, and I mean, again, what a character. I said to Darren Melville, I had to kick his backside a lot, Archie, do it more. But he would always get Players Player award at the end of the year. And I said to Darren Melville, why does Archie always get it, And he said, you still haven't worked it out. He said, when you give a lad a bit of a jolly up, Archie after the session would always go up and say, take the notice, you're pretty good, I like you, And so right. In the end, at the end of the scene, they'd all vote for him as Players Player, But no, he was a tremendous player, and...
We're going to jump around a little bit, but I want to take you in a direction. There was a time we played at Waikato FC, and Sam, we were teammates, and Chris Wood was he 14, 15? He was just coming through, and he was sort of on the bench, and he was this man-child. And I actually wrote about it for the Herald, this one training where I was the starting striker, and I had to mark Woodsy at a corner. We were doing set pieces. And he's just wrestled me like a rag doll, and he's gotten on the end of one, and he's headed into the top corner. And I've got a blast in from Rog. Why is this kid scoring from a set piece? I was thinking, shit, he's pretty bloody big though, isn't he? He's a bit of a unit for 14. So my question for you, I mean, you were very instrumental in him getting his start across at West Brom. Did he stick out to you as someone from a very early age during those Waikato FC years that would go on to be a Premier League star like he is now? Did you see that coming a long way off?
Well, the good thing about Woodsy was he had a great attitude, and if you remember, what we did was he was only 15, and it's like Marco Rojas, but I'd done this all my way through, I'd bring him in and work with the first team, because it does bring them on. I used to do it with Chris Jackson down at Napier, bring him in, they work with the first team. And what I realised with Woodsy, more than anything else, although he was a big lad, he was a goal thief. He was like a Jimmy Greaves or a Suarez in a big body. He always, and they do, like Dennis Law, there'd be a deflection and he would be the first there. And so his parents said that they wanted to send him over to England. I think they'd got a contact in Everton. But I said, well, send him over now at this age and we'll go into West Brom first. because I'd worked with West Brom. They'd done our courses, and it worked out. You know, he went in, he did very well with the youth team. He came back and played for a season and then went back. And that's what I'd learned, is that if you go over at 16, they've already got the apprentices earmarked, so you've got to be better than them. But if you can go over early, you'll be on the tick list, the original tick list. And yeah, so that's what happened with Woodsy, and he took full advantage of it.
He was such an ungainly character, though. I remember, I think I was watching with you. You might have been coaching at St. Paul's at the time, or maybe we were watching a game together. And Woodsy's there, and you wouldn't think, shit, this guy's going to have a future. But he's popped up and scored 4 goals. Yeah. You know, he sort of headed through a brick wall, and he was in the right place at the right time. But you can't say that you would have picked him to be a Premier League star at that age, or could you?
Well, you knew that the great thing is if you're a goal scorer, you got something. And Woodsy did have this. And funny enough, though, you're dead right, because they loaned him out, I think it was to Walsall or somewhere like that. At West Brom, they'd always loan him 1 division down, never 2 or 3.
I think he went Barnsley.
Barnsley,
yeah.
That was the one. He went to Barnsley and they were struggling. So all he was doing was chasing and having to get back. And I said to Michael Appleton, let's get him, because Brighton were keen, get him down to Brighton, who were top of the league below. Get him in there, because he'll have chances. Well, he went to Brighton. Next thing, he's scoring goals left, right and centre. Everybody's looking at him. Comes back, gets into the first team, you know. And because that's what he is. He's a goal thief, you know. And give Woodsy his due. He's made advantage of everything that's come his way, you know, which is because the levels between the top and the bottom aren't that big.
Right, and that's what I wanted to get to too, because you've obviously coached with a ton of talented young players over the years. How much of it is the mental aspect? I mean, going away to West Brom, doing the apprentice programs, that's not easy, right? Being away from home, that sort of thing. How many have failed because they're mentally not strong enough? Where would you credit Woodsy's mentality as a reason for his success?
Well, I think his mentality is definitely part of it, but I think he did very well when he went over there, you know. I mean,
did he just touch on, because for those that don't know, you ended up being his under-18 coach at West Bromwich Albion when he got there. He did have a little period when he first got there where it took him time to adapt, is that right, to the English game?
I think it took him a little bit of time to adapt to England.
Yeah.
I mean, he boarded with some of the players, and they said to me, could you have a word with Woodsy, because in Birmingham, in this area, you can't come out in the morning, even though it's pre-season, with bare feet like you can in New Zealand, because there's drug things on the floor, you know, syringes, and you could tell him to get his shoes on, you know. So, yeah, that was one of the things. But
so I think that's a really overlooked part of it, is that you were kind of hands-on during some of those formative years at West Brom.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I think as much as it's a familiar face a lot of the time as well,
yes,
and a brand new environment that helps.
Yeah, but also, and if you talk to the lads like
Ash Malcolm
and people who were there who've come over and done coaching, you know, they were that's why I like West Brom. The youth players were a good bunch of players. Whereas often, if you went in on trial at a club, often they wouldn't pass to you, you know, because they didn't want you taking the place. But at West Brom, that whole group, Romain Sawyers and those lot, were really good lads, you know. So
I think a couple of those boys, Ash Malcolm, who you touched on, who came out and coached at Melville for a summer, and another lad took Woodsy under their wing quite a lot. They were rooming with him, and I don't think you can underestimate how much that helps a lad settle as well when 2 lads are looking out from 2 local lads.
How would you compare his talent as a youngster compared to other players you've coached?
Because when you were New Zealand under 20s coaches, who were the top players, or under 20 coach? Who were the top players then? in that generation?
Well, there was Kevin Fallon's lad, Sean.
Rory.
Yeah, no, and it, you know, I mean, he was at Liverpool and scored in the Oceania things. He, you know, there was, you know, you had your Gavin Wilkinsons and people like that around there. So, you
Was
know,
Visilic in that group? Was it his age group?
no, Visilic, I think, was after.
Right.
You know, but I did work with him for a year. I mean, again, he was great lad, you know, really good.
We talk about the goal thief thing, and we might be getting into a little bit of weeds here, but it's interesting to me as a former striker, current striker, maybe.
Former.
Can you teach that? You know, he's gone on to be worth millions and millions of pounds because of this skill, and I hear a bit of a divide in football community is, oh, you can't teach that, you know, that's just instinct, knowing where to be. Is that something you can teach, though?
Yes, it is, but nobody used to do it. So you used to say, God, he's a finisher. It's natural. But in actual fact, working with the likes of John Cartwright, who was Venable's right-hand man at Crystal Palace, what you have got to do is, from those early ages onwards, 7 onwards, you've got to introduce how to finish properly. So, for example, at Premier Skills, if somebody has a shot, it doesn't count if there isn't a second man moving in shouting rebound, right? So they're getting used to follow,
Yeah.
right? That they're getting used to it. And like I said, the great Dennis Law, they all said that when a keeper caught the ball, he was immediately in front of them with his eyes saying, if you drop it or parry it, you've got a problem, you know. Yeah. But there is a bit of both, you know, and you're right. In the past, basically, they always used to say, yeah, that's a natural instinct, that, you know. And I'm not saying it isn't, but I think you can help people by working on it from early ages, you know.
Right. Okay. We'll just move along. So one of the most grabbing part of the bio is, and we spoke about it a lot with Sam on his podcast, is the sort of the fuse, the fire. You know, when things perhaps aren't going your way, it can explode. And there's been some memorable ones over the years. And I remember I was a young Waikato United fan, and I remember one time at Muir Park, and I think there was an altercation in the grandstand. You and I don't know who it was, but it was all a bit blurry, but I've sort of been retold it over the years. It was like, you know, you firing up and having a fist fight with a punter after a Waikato game.
It was the one with the guy with the glasses.
No, but that wasn't about the game.
It was in the car park, wasn't it?
Is that where
no,
You've come out of the club.
It was on the field.
No,
the car park one was your one,
That's
Sam.
a different story.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about any of the stories. I'm interested in the psyche behind it. If you can feel yourself going in those moments, if you have any control, if you look back on them with regret, or if you think that was an important part of your makeup to get the success that you got.
Yeah, well, there were 2 occasions then. There was one at Muir Park when this fella came up to me, and it's because I hadn't picked his boy. But I hadn't picked his boy for the for the Waikato reps under 18s, you see, and he wasn't very good, and he came up on the pitch, that, and so we did have a little bit of a fisticuffs, but luckily Peter Cooper was watching. And so when somebody tried to say, he said, no, Roger had nothing to do with it. And it wasn't. He came after me. Why haven't you put my son in? That sort of thing. But the other one was, this is classic, and again, it was nothing to do with me. There was a Wanderers game, and on the Saturday, although we'd got a game on the Sunday, I'd always go down and watch games. Well, at half-time, Ray Pooley and a couple of his mates, because Ray was my assistant, went on the pitch at half-time and started kicking the ball in the goal, right? Which even I thought, that's disrespectful. You
It
shouldn't
was
do
some of your
that.
players with Ray.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
who gone on.
yeah. So anyway, I'm going to my car, and suddenly this fella comes in. Why were you effing kicking the ball on and that sort of thing? And he's really got aggressive, and that wasn't me. So next minute we've grabbed hold of each other, but I was very lucky that my manager Rod Campbell saw it happening, so he got between us. So now I'm holding the guy over the top of Rod's shoulders, and I saw him swing a punch at me. So I ducked, and he hit Rod on the side of the head. So then I looked up again, and he tried to do it with the other fist. So again, I ducked down, and he hit Rod on the other side. But then, luckily, they weren't big punches, they were just slaps. But luckily, one of their members came and pulled him off and said, come on, come away. And he said to me, he's had too much to drink, and I think Sam was in the car.
I was at both of these,
Yeah.
I was.
Sam was in the car watching, and
If you think I'm taking a punch for you as well,
Yeah.
Sam, that'll think I'm
Not in your nature.
No, definitely not.
I'd be better off taking it myself.
yeah.
But it was like
I can't imagine that, by the way.
Yeah, if I can, I think this side of your personality has mellowed a lot in the last 15, 20 years. Your fuse was a lot shorter, and I think because of your profile, you would get into, not always physical, but you would get into arguments and altercations quite a lot. You don't as much now, but sometimes now the red mist still comes out, just less frequently than it did in your heyday.
Thank you very much for your support.
Yeah, I think I saw a flash of it in the Melville Wanderers derby this year, when there was a questionable call by one of the match officials, and at final whistle, Wilkinson Jr. let the referees know he wasn't impressed with the decision.
But I was actually quite calm, and
Yeah.
let's not throw me into the basket with them.
Yeah, and then as the referees were coming off the field, Wilkinson Sr. was a little bit more short with his
I just
feedback.
I just gave a quality examination of the referee's performance.
Can we get the exact quote?
Well, I mean, all I heard was you were a bunch of fucking morons. Repeat. Repeat. But I'd never seen that kind of rage before.
Yeah.
So for me, it was quite like, whoa, now I understand what people
I
are
think
talking
now
about.
it comes out when you're defending me or my teams. Because tell them the altercation you had with Malcolm McPherson's dad before you patched it up and became best friends, lifelong friends.
Is this Mel McPherson, North Shore United
Yeah,
coach?
yeah.
Well, yeah, his dad was down watching the game, just up from me, and he was shouting every time Melville did something like, "That's a foul, ref," and he was having a go at Melville all the time. So again, I said, "Well, you're Scottish, aren't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what would you know about it? When was the last time you went to a fucking World Cup?" And who do you think you're talking to? And I said, "Oh, sorry, but when did you last go to a World Cup?" I said, "How can the jocks tell us anything about how to play football?" And it's actually, I brought that out because it is true. You see, in England, often your favourite players, I've mentioned Dennis Law, Dalglish, many of your favourite players were Scottish, right? But now there's no, if you like, world stars from there, because what's
Robertson's quite good.
Yeah, but I mean,
It doesn't have the story.
Yeah.
but the street has gone. They used to play on the street, and I mean,
But
Dennis.
go on, how did this story finish? You've ended up,
So you two are...
Umbrella and Anne, ready to go for each other, and then
No, it wasn't. We just had a go, and then later on, I saw that he was Malcolm's dad. So I went up to him and I said, "Look, sorry," and then and he went, "Yeah, I'm sorry as well." And then And then we both went in the club rooms and we're the best of mates, and
and then you gave each other a hug in the car. You live.
yeah. So yeah, it was. Yes, it was quite memorable.
How much of your time now is making amends with former adversaries when you go to football grounds?
Yeah, well, now I always go up and have a quick word with Kevin Fallon.
There's a bit of history there as well, wasn't there?
Well, no, that one too. See, the other thing is, there wasn't that much between the managers, and I'll tell you why. Is because in those days, what would happen is we'd be fighting tooth and nail through the season, but then out of season there would be the coaches' conference. So, like then Kevin, me, and all the others, Dave Farrington, would be doing these coaching things, and then we go out for a drink afterwards and laugh off all the things that we'd been having a go about, So there was a lot of camaraderie round all the clubs and the, Don Jones and all that lot. It was, it was a good time, Yeah, you fought like hell, but then, you were mates as well. And
the last time I saw Wanderers aside, the Red Mist, was I think 2008 when you were coaching Waikato, and you used to do these team sort of meetings on a Tuesday after the game where we'd all stand around in a circle and you'd address people one by one and you'd say, what you did poorly in the game and what you did right. And maybe I want to get into this afterwards, if this, if perhaps now looking back you would have used a different technique, but some of the players got really offended and got their tail up when you had a go at them individually. And I remember one of them was Joey Simpkins, a strong little, probably the strongest, fiercest guy in that Waikato team in the heart of midfield. And you'd had a go at him and he'd had a go back at you, and it had set you off. And, no disrespect, you weren't in your physical prime at that point. You were, a little bit older. But you were right up in his face. You were ready to go. He'd said enough to set you off, and you were ready to fight him. And it ended up, the team having to pull you guys apart. So I guess my first question is, where does that sort of sticking up for yourself come from? Is that like, did you get into a bit of trouble as a lad? Was it a harsh upbringing? And how do you look back on times like that at Waikato in that specific incident?
Well, I'd been over in England and I'd fallen in love with the beautiful game. I'd been working, that was before going back to West Brom. I'd come over for that time. And I'd worked with John Cartwright and we'd set up Premier Skills. And it was about developing individuality, developing this, developing that. And it was the same when I was at Auckland City. What I didn't realise, I was very naive, was that you can't, even though I'm Roger Wilkinson, you can't suddenly change all that in just a pre-season and a few games. It takes time. And I was, even though getting on as a coach, I was quite naive. And also, times have changed. Like I said, Ted Duggan coming in and whacking you around. And I mean, at Waikato United, I'd do the same things. We'd come in, this is what you did well, this is what you didn't do. And we talked about character, you've got to work all the time. And Joey was the wrong fit for that. But having said that, now looking back, I should have probably, and I did a bit, put my arm around his shoulder at odd times, But
so it's more picking knowing which players you can go after and knowing which players you can't.
Yeah, but also maybe I'm getting used to that sort of honesty. What we've got. I mean, I do it even with the kids now. You did that very well, but that was, I've told you about that. What did you do wrong? I should be checking my shoulder. Yeah. But don't get me wrong, you've been training really well, I like it. So you do the sandwich.
Sam, is that a tactic that you would consider, now you've been coaching Northern League for the last 4 years, would you do something like that now?
Yeah, I would, but I would do it with the boys that I'd had enough time with that I guess I knew I can give them a bit more harsh feedback or honest feedback. I'm probably, maybe partly off being around those experiences, I'm probably a bit more aware of what the young player, the young Kiwi player can take and what they can't take. And it is different because I spent every night at Muir Park watching your trainings, and like watching some of the bollockings you would give like Cozzy and Dash and people like that. I'm thinking if you did that now, you'd have 3 players for the game on the weekend. So it has changed. I still think what you're saying in terms of honest feedback and singling people out and accountability, they do need that. It's just when you can get to the point of giving it to them quite honestly, you have to work up to that stage. I think like everything, it's 50-50. People have changed, coaches have got to adapt, but we don't also want to lose that where players now are so pampered you can't ever tell them anything honest because you don't want to offend them. So it's a balancing act, and I probably try and learn off your experiences. I think you probably do as well. But like Stephen was saying, when the red mist comes, sometimes with you, that goes out the window, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not with juniors, but I mean, with seniors it was.
Yeah.
And
because just going back to the Joey Simpkins story, I think to add to that story, the bit that got me was when you sent him out of training and then he went to grab the keys for the changing rooms, which were on your, and you went, they're my fucking keys. And he went, well, I've got to get in the changing room. And you basically chased him across the pitch to get the keys. And again, we're all thinking, Dad, you haven't got this in your locker if he does turn on you.
If it does, that's what I wanted to get. If it does kick off, are you're backing yourself to fight that fight?
Yeah. But the mist, isn't it? The red mist. Because this is the other one. To put this into perspective, when you go, like when I came back from England one time and we are in the car at Hillcrest and some young lads, a group of young lads in a car like cut you off and you're now beeping and then they're playing silly beggars like braking and stuff in front of you, and when we get stopped again, you're trying to get out the car to go and front these like 4 early 20s up, and I'm having to go like, what are you doing? Like getting out of the car to pull you back in, but it's kind of, there's no let's weigh the situation up, and it's probably the same in those situations. It's just right, the mist is here and I'm fighting my corner here, and it's Rudge against the world, isn't it?
yes.
But to go back to Steve's question, is that something that you grew up with in post-World War II UK?
Well, yeah, I mean, my father was an ex-boxer, very good boxer. Manchester had 4 world champions before the war, and he was going to be the next. He was welterweight, but unfortunately lost a leg in the war, had it cut off.
Oh, really?
And but Dad was, I can remember as a kid, some older boys bullied me on the council estate, and I saw Dad coming down the path. So I ran up to him and said, Dad, they've made me go in the puddle, because there was a big puddle, you know. And he whacked me round the head and said, well, get out there and sort them out then, you know, and just sent me back. There was no sympathy, you know. Don't get me wrong, he was the best ever, but so that's what it was like on council estates in England. You had to, you know, put up for yourself. And he taught me how to box, so I was, but I said, I think I want to be a fighter, Dad, you know. And he said, no, your nose is too big, son. I thought, thanks, you know, let me know gently. But, and I don't know where he got it from, but my dad was a sport fanatic. So he would take me to games every Saturday, even though he had 2 jobs. He'd get up. We would always go and watch games. We'd be, he had an understanding about the game. There was, like, we went to watch United, and he was originally from Manchester. We'd moved down to St Albans, so we were at Arsenal, and we're watching a Manchester United game, and he said they're playing good football, United, you know, even though he was a City fan. And he said, Matt Busby, when he used to play, he said he was a thinking footballer. He didn't just hit it, he passed it. And it's only later on I thought, where did he get that understanding from? Because his father died when he was very young. Mm-hmm. And yet he had this look at him, look at the way he plays. And it was the same with cricket. He, because I was also played for St Albans Cricket Club, and he'd take me out, he couldn't, but he'd throw it down, move your feet, lad, don't hit it in the air, that's another way of getting out. You know, don't do this, do that, do this. And in actual fact, I mean, that was one reason why the captain of St Albans second 11, because I was playing for them as a 16-year-old, he got banned by the club because I was an opening bat, so I was in there. We only had 2.5 hours, so I was playing. And he said, hit out. We've only got about another hour and a quarter.
Good accent.
Yeah, well, that's where they were, from St Albans. And then he said, you go in, run him out. We've got to get some runs. And then I ran them out. So it went on and on. We've got about 40 minutes left. And in the end, he totally lost it. He said, hit out. For fuck's sake, hit out. Well, you don't do that at St Albans Cricket Club, you know, so he got banned. But that's because in my head was always Dad saying, do this, and it was the same when I was playing, you know, don't give it away.
So was that the same when, in moments of confrontation, you would think, I got to stay in my corner here?
Yeah, definitely.
Or, you know, no one's pushing me about. Is that where that comes from?
Because, I mean, I'm not the biggest and not the strongest, but that came from Dad. You know, you don't stand down, son. Stand up for yourself.
That father-son dynamic is interesting. It's kind of the reason we brought Wilkie on board. I'd like to touch on, for those who aren't aware, Sam was, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say, the most technically proficient under-12 player in New Zealand around, I don't know, mid-90s, early 90s?
Yeah,
how much of that, I mean, obviously you're a football man, that's your life, your son is going to pick that up. Were you desperate for him to be a professional footballer, and did you ever worry about pushing him too hard?
No, but I just did what my father did, right? And the other big thing was that Dad would always be taking me up the field, because there weren't tellers then. So I'd get home, he'd take me up the field and work with me. You know, get over the ball, pull it down, I'll throw it up, you know, do this, do that, do the other. So that was built in to what I was doing. And he was very clever. Again, I don't know where he got it from, but he'd say there, don't just put your foot on, you just touch it. It's like a wand. Because a lot of people, for a high ball, they'd put your foot on to trap it. And Dad would say, no, just touch it to the side, you know. Little bits like that. So
you just copied his method with Sam, and it created this incredibly technical footballer.
Yes.
And was there a point where you thought that he was going to go all the way?
Well, and it's funny looking back. You see, what happened was I took him over to Crewe, and Dario put him in with the first team, and he trained with them, and he was very keen to sign him. But, and this was early, I think you're about 13, 14, weren't you?
Yeah, about 13.
Yeah.
The first team?
Yeah,
No,
that was mad because Crewe were the sort of first academy, family club. So, like, I turned up to watch the first team pre-season. It was only pre-season, so they'd done the running, and he said, you got your boots? And I was sort of like, yeah. And he said, well, come on in, you can join in the games here. So they just, and the players were all good, like, so, I mean, I trained with my own age as well, but yeah, he was just, that was kind of Crewe's thing, you know, if there were young lads around, so.
Do you feel partly responsible, because you've obviously taught him the technical side of the game, but you didn't give him any sort of athletic genes, did you?
Well, no.
Yeah, he tried.
Yeah. Again,
you did show some pace or some sort of aerial
I
ability.
spent Christmas Day doing sprint drills, like he did try.
Stephen did that last year, actually, as well.
No, well, I mean, Sam was similar to me, is that he could run all day. You know, he won the school cross country, that sort of thing. But the further up you get, you know, that sort of
Fast
extra
twitch
bit.
fighters,
But also, you need a bit of luck. And what happened was that Crew were keen to sign him. Dario said, yeah, he did. And again, looking back, but I said, well, can you give me a job here? Because he was, and he said, well, no, we haven't got a job. So I had to come back to New Zealand. This was before that time. But then when he was due to go back again, and we took him back, you got that thing in your thigh, didn't you? It was a bit of a tear, wasn't it, with Ron Kane, and it kept hanging round. And but you know, when you look at what's had gone on at Crew, and I don't think it was Dario, but they had a lot of problems there with.
Could have gone south very quickly.
Yeah, with you know, a fella who was molesting the kids. And I look back and think, thank God, we didn't put him in there.
Yeah.
But
would you looking back now on how you tried to develop me as a player, what would you do differently now if you had that time again?
That's a good question.
That's a bloody good question.
Because I'm going to have to go through this soon. I'm just going to prepare myself.
no, well, it's funny you said it to me. The other thing that young players have got to do is sort of like gymnastics and stuff like that, where you build up, like you were talking about, that fast twitch stuff, you know, and where you can do handsprings and all that sort of stuff, as well as the other plyometrics, you know, which we didn't do. I mean, I'd get him running, I'd get him doing this, but that's what I'd do differently, you know. And
I'll interject there, because maybe physically, I think there is a ceiling to people physically. You know, you can sharpen those tools, but you're not going to turn someone like me into a world-class dynamic
if you're a
athlete.
5 out of 10 for speed, you might get to a 7.
Or a 6.5.
Three to four.
What I would probably say is, and I don't think this was deliberate, and like you said, there was no blueprint for what you were doing. You were just taking bits. But I think I was probably too reliant on you for feedback and guiding me. And if I look back now, I think if you'd have left me to figure some stuff out maybe a little bit more and made me a bit more independent at times, particularly with the view of then going over to England and getting dropped into clubs middle of nowhere on my own, I think at times that might have armed me a bit more for going into that, you know what I mean? You had so much knowledge, and I was so lucky to have a coach as a dad, but it almost spoilt me with feedback and coaching. And sometimes I think, actually maybe if I'd have had to figure more out myself, that would have armed me a bit more. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but...
Yeah.
Let's talk about how your coaching journey evolved. So I want to... When you came out, and I think you were coaching Claude Linds when you sort of first came out after Seaton, was it? Maybe around sort of 35, mid-30s.
I feel like you've forgotten the whole Napier thing, like taking the club
Did you not read Bruce's bio?
from nowhere to the National League.
When you were mid-30s and you were coaching, how did you differ from when you were maybe in your sort of 60s and 30 years of coaching? How different were you as a coach, and what were those differences?
Well, I think that part of, and it is important, part of being a good coach is that you do learn and improve. And every time you coach, you learn something. Even working with the kids, you think, we've got to work more on that. Or could I have made that a little bit better? So, you're always learning, and also the game does change. It's like society. Society changes, the game has changed. I mean, it was very much just when you were playing, we attack, then we defend. You know, there wasn't so much of sort of like parking the bus and stuff like that came with Mourinho and those sort. And so the game has changed. And also, looking back, I think there was more space for individuality, in those games. There was more space. Now it's become very athletic, backwards and forwards, everybody. But a lot of those players haven't had the skills honed in to be able to play in that way, you know. And
what was different? One of your golden eras was Waikato United, when I wouldn't say you were a long ball team, but you were quite a front foot direct team with the players you had. I wouldn't say if you were working now with kids or whatever age group, you would base it around that style of play. Would you agree? What changed for you to go from, well, I'll be a bit more pragmatic and it's about what's going to get us the result, to this kind of more romantic view of the game around highly skilled players? What caused that change?
no, well, I mean, nothing really. Napier were known as a good footballing team. But if you've got Darren Melville who can drop a ball 50 yards on your foot, and you've got Darren Fellows up front who's so quick, then you're going to try and get it into dash. You know, so
it's personnel versus...
Yeah, and it is, you know. Whereas when at Claudelands, when I had Nico, it was a case of playing round and getting into Nico on, you know, in that top third, and he would develop things himself. So, but what I became more aware of working with Cartwright is that the most important ages are actually 7 to 16, 17. And that's where you've got to get the best coaches. They've got to be working with the kids to develop them as individuals.
So after that interaction, did you consciously decide to work more with youth players after those interactions with John? Or...
Yeah, we did a lot of work with youth players, different people, but of course, if something came up, you'd do it, you know. I mean, luckily, when I came back, went into Wanderers with Cozzy and had a smashing group of players, and we did very well, you know. But at the same time, I was still going down and helping out with some of the kids. You always do. West Brom was a great experience, and again I was the under-23 coach, but working with the first team and also the under-18s as well as the under-23s, and but also I'd go into and help out with the academy.
Yeah, which by the way, you did get banned from the position specific night.
Yeah.
You tell that story, which again is vintage Rog. I did it my way, Wilkinson.
Well, what happened was, and Mark Harrison, I mean, he's a great lad, but they had this position specific thing. So what they'd do is somebody would play the ball to a winger, he'd run down, and then he would have to run forward, he'd pass it in, and the fella would try and head it or play it in. But there was no opposition, you know, so I changed it. I made it into a game, but enough room so you could play it out. Yeah, if you played it right, now you could play it in. People, one going near post, one going far post, one coming in. Then H called me in the next day. I've heard you didn't do our position specific. I said, well, would I do something I don't believe in? You've got to... I said, when you play a game, is there opposition? He said, yeah. I said, well, you've got to put it in your practices, right? And give him his due. He said, no, I'm not, you can't go down anymore. But funny enough, he started bringing it into his own coaching. When he was doing the coaching, he was open-minded, you know. It's just, I don't think he wanted to change all the stuff he'd put out for position specific, you know. And it's funny because Dan Ashworth, who then went into the FA, and that's why England, he did a good job at the FA as well. He was the head academy coach, and he said, come with me for this session. I'll do the first bit, which will be a little bit drill based. But he said, I want you to do the realistic bit because, you know, I think they get a lot out of that as well. And he was very open-minded, you know.
Was that your only kind of training ground bust up at West Brom?
What the with that? No, there was one other.
Oh, okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, there was the fitness coach, right? And he'd set himself up. He was the youth team fitness coach. And what they had, which was really great, they had a wall like Liverpool did, a sort of square wall where you could go in and work on different things. And Michael Appleton always got me in working with the players, you see. He said, get them doing those things off the wall, receiving and turning, that sort of thing. He said, I love that stuff that you do. Anyway, this fella suddenly shouted out, any danger, Rog? Can you get him over here? Now, he's just the fitness coach. So I said, who the friggin' hell are you shouting at, in front of these young players? Anyway, we had a little bit of a set to in the changing room. Not thinking, but don't talk to me like that again, this sort of thing. And the manager, Tony Mowbray, came and he said, oh, all right, we all have disagreements, just leave it like that, and yeah, it was interesting.
I love the watered down version.
Yeah.
Hell. Come on,
let loose. Yeah, because you don't remember, I was actually there because I'd come in to train on my day off.
Yeah, well,
so you'd had a group, and essentially the argument was the scholars had jobs in the morning, and part of it was to get the fitness gear out. He was working with the older ones, and they'd not done it, or some of them were away, and he'd had a go at you from across the field because the scholars, while you hadn't done the job. So I'm sat in this change room, first time I've ever been in there, like, yeah, you can come in and train with my group to make the numbers up. And like these kids come running in like, your dad's going to get in a fight with Dan Harris, your dad's going to get in a fight. And I can just hear again the rage, like, you got something to fucking say to me, come and say it to my face, yelling at me across the fucking training ground like this. This is at like Premier League West Bromwich Albion, and I'm thinking, why the fuck has this happened the one day I've come into the club? And then obviously the first team players have clocked it all. And as you came walking down the corridor, they all started hiding behind the bins going, he's coming, like, yeah.
But also a lot of them, even the fella, and Dan has improved, he's got better, but even the people like who did all the kit, washed all the kit, and they all come up to me and after and said, thanks for doing that. He's up himself,
So I want to sort of compare and contrast. So, Sam's sort of mid-30s. When you were mid-30s, you were blazing the trail across New Zealand, How do you compare to where he is as a coach right now? What were your differences? What were you better at than him, and what's he better at than you?
I don't think he's better at anything. Well, I think he's more advanced than I was because he'd had the professional experience in England, which I didn't have. As a coach, I'd only just finished playing non-league, and then I'd been on a course at Lilleshall. Barry Truman was over there as the director of coaching for New Zealand, also the All Whites coach. And he said to me, we're looking for young coaches over in New Zealand, why don't you come out? So I was more or less finished. I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So
did you know New Zealand before then?
Pardon?
Did you know anything about New Zealand?
I knew
before?
It was part of Australia, yeah. I knew obviously of it. But anyway, so I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So I came out, and the experience I'd had was playing, coaching at sort of rep level over there, Yorkshire schools, that type of thing. And so comparatively, he's a lot further on, and so, but
I've also had your experiences over here to draw on, Napier, Waikato United, which, I'm not saying that gives me a cheat sheet, but it's your experiences and now my experience as well, which has been a leg up for me, most definitely.
Yeah.
Was there any hesitation in your son, I speak from a journalist. My dad obviously was a journalist. I've gone to the journalism trade, which is, for any young listeners out there, probably not a great industry to get into. Was there any ever thought when perhaps you've gone through some hard times as a coach to steer Sam away from coaching? Was that ever a thought, or was it just that's his passion, that's always what he's going to...
Well, I didn't steer him into coaching. He wanted to do that. You know, I was doing the coaching over there. We had a coaching company, Premier Skills. He was still playing at that time a bit over there, and then he got a little bit disenchanted with English football, non-league, because it was being a midfielder who wanted to get on the ball. All it was into the front man and battle. So then he got into coaching, and but I mean, I didn't make him, and he was working in the company as well, you know.
It was pretty hard. You were always going to get into coaching, weren't you?
Yeah, subconsciously probably. I mean, what else do I know other than football, you know? And I think, going back to your point, I've got the benefit of Dad's experiences, but there's a lot of things Dad, in terms of his personality, naturally has over me, in terms of, I guess, that kind of conviction in what he says, and that almost gregarious nature of his personality is a lot more naturally suited to being a leader, to speaking in front of people, storytelling, stuff like that. So I've had to learn a lot of that, which I have off Dad. So was I like really suited and always going to be a football coach? Nah, probably not. I wanted to be a player. That didn't work. Like Dad said, it was almost by accident. I trained as a teacher because I had to do something, and I fell into working for Premier Skills, and it kind of snowballed from there. And I guess I've taught myself along the way to adapt and become a better public speaker, a better leader, a better communicator, that sort of stuff. But I don't think it was always going to be necessarily my pathway.
Do you now get more of a kick having watched Sam as a player and his achievements, or watch Sam as a coach and his achievements?
Both, you know.
We're Rose Bowl, 94.
No, it was both. It was, you always enjoy, and you'll find this, watching your kids play and being part of that, and then with the coaching, you know, seeing and hoping to help. And
on the flip side of that, though, when I played, as much as you enjoyed watching me, there was a lot of frustration for you when I didn't play well.
You couldn't take the handbrake off.
Yeah, you know, I could, and I will be the same, no doubt. But you know, there was a sort of like, what are you doing, son? Like, liven up, you know. So it wasn't all just like, I just like being around him while he's playing. There was elements where,
oh yeah, no, you're gonna. And you want them to do as well as they could do, and even now, if I'm watching a game, I'm always assessing the players. You know, want them to do certain things, and the advantage we both had is working with John Cartwright, because Cartwright is the best coach in the world. You know, he's worked at all levels. Arsenal first team coach, Crystal Palace with Venables. Venables, when he went back to Crystal Palace, and the first people he brought in was John. You know, he's done everything, and I think that also stimulated Sam with the coaching, because you know, you have insights that you know, are different than other people, and yeah, he's immense.
Because I asked that question, and it's a pointed question, and those that know me know I'm an emotional guy, but there was a point, it was this year, at the Napier tournament, which you started way back when the Melville team won a quarterfinal against the odds, and you were on the pitch and you were crying, and you had a moment and you were like, oh, I'm just so happy for them and that, and I just kind of thought...
But I think that was for the players as much as anything, wasn't it? Because, no, 100% it was, because I know what you're like with those lads who you've been around for 2 or 3 years. That's what I saw. I don't think...
all right.
No,
we'll agree to disagree.
Yeah,
on that.
I think, because I wouldn't see that moment wasn't about me.
No, but it's
a youth tournament. I think that's just pride towards the lads that we work with.
and also I had been looking up at the sun a lot.
The onions on the barbecue.
Good.
We spoke on Sam's podcast, which you will go back and listen to after this, about some of his harder times coaching. And I think it was a year ago, 2 years ago, where Melville had lost about 7 games in a row. He was at his wit's end. He was working long hours. He was getting paid fuck all, and we had a conversation about him maybe thinking about doing something else. Like, it was all too much, and he couldn't really see the vision of the future. Did you have any moments like that across your coaching career where you thought about walking away from the game?
No. It was. They were all different challenges, and and to be honest, I didn't have. I was very lucky that I didn't have many of those things that came in at me. You know, I mean, Napier was a rise up. The last season was a struggle. Coming up to the Waikato, Claudelands, then Waikato United, that was tremendous. You know, so I've never. No, it's what I do. You know, so, and even if you have a bad time, and don't get me wrong, this is what you come to terms with. I mean, when I left Auckland City, you know, and then when I came down here with Waikato, all right, if it didn't work out, you know, I went back to England and started again with the coach education and that sort of thing. So the coaching isn't, or hasn't been just about coaching teams. It's actually about coach education, developing coaches, all of that sort of stuff as well. And always was. I mean, even in England, when I as a young coach, was employed by the FA to run the junior courses and stuff like that. You know, so I've always had the coach education side of part of what I do.
I think just to add to that again is another key difference in personalities, that you've always had incredible conviction on if you think something's right or you back yourself, it doesn't waver. I would be, I'm not sure, you know, a little bit more self-doubt. If it's not going well, it's my fault. And I think those are two distinct personality traits that we're quite different on. You know, like I say, if all 5 of us here, 4 of us, disagree with you, it ain't changing your mind. You know what I mean? You're, no, we're doing it my way. And that you've got that self-belief as well, haven't you? Whereas I would be a bit more like, shit, if everyone's telling me this, I might need to look at this, or maybe I'm not right, you know. And I think that's a strength and at times a weakness of yours.
Yeah, but you do learn as you go on, and I'm less like that than I was before. In other words, it's good to reflect on what other people say and be honest with yourself, and sometimes, I'm not doing that right. I've got to start doing this, you know.
Was that Auckland City experience that you talk on, was that the most challenging coaching experience that you had?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And for those that don't know, it was a reasonably short tenure at Auckland City following on from
it was
Alan Jones?
Yes. Jonesy left. He recommended me. I'd come back from England I've been with Wanderers, we'd won the first division to get up. No, it was the wrong fit, and like I said, I thought I would introduce the beautiful game, and in actual fact, and Jonesy in his way was right, because they tend to go long ball and just it was difficult to fit in. But as John Cartwright said, the most important thing is to be a lucky coach rather than a great coach, because I think 3 penalties we had that we missed.
There was a lost 1-0 to Manawatu and missed 2 penalties. Drew with Canterbury and missed another penalty in the last minute, which glosses overall. But it would have glossed over something that wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
beneath it all.
Yeah, it was the wrong mix,
Yeah.
And
that was my point from earlier. I think Roger Wilkinson from the Waikato United era, who would have said, yeah, we'll carry on that 4-4-2, we'll work the channels, that'll get us results, is probably what Jonesy was recommending, but you'd gone through a little bit of a change and a change in philosophy, and it was a bit more, I'm going to improve every player and make them better, and that probably wasn't the right fit at the time with that group of players. Whereas at Wanderers beforehand, you had me, Mainey, and a bunch of young lads that we were all up for it. Yeah, we'll learn and we'll develop. That was the right fit. It wasn't there, was it?
No, and it's like you say, it reminds me of Tony Poulos. Somebody rang him and said, I've got this job, what about my coaching philosophy? And he said, never mind your coaching philosophy, when you're coaching first team, get results, and then you introduce that gradually. He said, if you don't get the results, you won't have the time. And that's true.
Did you make a decision after Auckland that you wouldn't try to coach at National League level again?
No, because what happened was then, when I came down, who was it? Edmondson got the sack, so I had to take the Waikato team. And,
yes, I got the order wrong. Yeah, that was that.
So
it was a year and a half, and then you went back to England, didn't you?
Right.
That was where the West Brom and Woodsy over there.
Okay. Let's talk about man management, because it's obviously such a big part of being a coach, and you've had some incredible characters in your dressing rooms over the years. We touched on sort of Darren Fellows, Mark Cozzy, Paul Nixon, Declan Edge, Neil Mooch. How hard was it to control these guys, and were there any really memorable moments where you couldn't get them under control, or things spiraled out, or techniques you used to sort of rein them in?
No, well, again, I think I was fortunate, especially at Waikato, because I had, if you like, those mini managers in round me. Brian Hayes would sort things out even before they came into that. Melville would sort it out, so that was quite fortunate. And also Jeff Kettle, who was the manager, was very good at calming everybody down and, in behind the scenes. And it was...
what about dealing with Dash when he kicked the car?
No, well, I mean, you did have characters, and...
What was that story?
Well, after a game, we're in the club rooms. It's the only time I ever had a drink. And somebody came up to me, I think it was Hazy, and said, Dash has just, his girlfriend has told him that she's packing in with him. So he went outside and kicked the lights in a car. I said, shit, well, we better... Was it a club member's car? He said, no, it was his own car. So, yeah, that's true. And
do you feel like you've still, and maybe Wilkie bring in on this, do you feel like you've still got those same sort of characters in the game now? Maybe it's just my perception, but it seems like teams are a lot younger and perhaps you don't have those sort of senior guys at National League.
Yeah, you definitely don't. You get a taste of it, I think, when you get the lads out from England. I feel like probably that group you had, there was probably more of that English feel, though you had some good young local players. You did have a good spine of English characters. I think there's less of it, but I mean, like, look at someone like Mark Evans, like the amount of, you'd class him around the dash, the amount of phone calls I was getting on a Thursday night, like, he's up to this or he's up to that, but definitely less of them. And yeah, I think, like you said, for whatever reason, the composition of squads is younger, which has probably changed that dynamic a little bit as well. So no, I don't think, I look back at the personalities you had, and I think there's not many like that I've worked with in groups, like Darren Melville and Brian Hayes and people like that. So
There's actually a rumour, Rog, that Taffy Roberts is still running around the training pitch somewhere. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Taffy was like a Welsh youth international, wasn't Manchester United, you know, but a real character. I mean, sometimes he wouldn't concentrate properly, and when we're doing the... So I said, no, we're in the game, and he's not concentrating, I'm doing the coaching. I said, right, if you don't want to train properly, you can run round the hills down at Porritt. So off he goes. Anyway, carry on the session, went all right, and turned the lights off, and we're just coming out the changing rooms, and Darren Fellows said, well, what about Taffy? I said, oh, shit, yeah. I said, well, go and get him. So they went and got him, and Dash said, why didn't you come in when we went? He said, I wasn't going to let that bastard beat me.
Gold. Rog, we can't have a podcast with Roger Wilkinson without touching on the jokes, because anyone who knows you for your one-liners. So what's your process? Are you studying up? Are you practicing these one-liners and then going and trialing them out on people, and the ones that stick you're repeating? How's this evolved?
Well, again, going back to my childhood, my father and his twin brother, Jack and Sam, were always cracking jokes. Always. And then, coming from England as well, as you know, wherever you live, there's always Live at the Apollo, or maybe it's... So it was all around you. So, yeah, I've always been brought up on it. And it's funny because there was a lad I taught in England on the outskirts of Manchester, and he got in touch with me. And now this is like 40 years later. And he said, what I remember most about you, sir, was that when we were playing football, if somebody got hit in the goalies, you'd say, don't rub them, count them. Right. and yeah, so, but also the humour is a way of interacting with players and other people as well, you know, even with the kids, you know, so...
Or strangers at Chartwell Mall.
Yes, yeah, well,
But that's what I mean, that I remember the Rog from, you know, when I was 10, and it was like 80% football serious, 20% jokes. And now I feel it's gone the other way. It's 80% jokes and 20% serious.
I think you've been kind. I think it's 95% jokes, 5% conversation.
No.
But where are you learning? What's your process? Are you going online? Have you got a book?
that is...
You can't reveal.
Yeah, so I can't reveal my sources.
Well, I think it's clear why you're now a bit hazy on some of your classic football stories is because you've shoved all those out of the way to memorise shit jokes, basically, haven't you?
But one of the other things is that, especially if you're coaching part-time, and I'm not working during the day...
Loads of time to read up on jokes.
But also...
He's just discovered YouTube as well.
Yeah,
So.
it is... You know, what else are you going to do? You know... So
Just work on your routine.
Just memorise gags for the helpless members of Anytime Fitness.
Yes. Like, I ring up Sam. You know, can we have a meeting? Have a cup of coffee? No, I've got too much to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear the jokes.
no,
Basically.
it is.
But the jokes may have hit a bit of a bum note at Katie's wedding.
No, they didn't. In actual fact,
That was probably the problem. Actually, you got a laugh on the.
I
first
got a
one.
laugh on the first one, and whoa, away we go. Yeah.
Would you admit though, there's not many father of the brides who, in their speech, don't even mention their daughter or the new son they've inherited, or had married into the family, and just go with gag after gag? Is that
No, well, I was nervous.
When the first one hits,
Yeah.
you just keep going.
No, and they laughed at the first one. Yeah, it was interesting times.
So was that also part? But before you were a coach, you were in sales, right? Tell us a little bit about that part of your life.
No, well, I was a PE teacher, and then I became head of PE, that sort of thing. But then what I found was that what got to me was if I was teaching PE all day, then I'm coaching all night. There was too much of the same. Now, down in Napier, Government Life had brought me in to do motivation talks for their agents, you see, because they wanted to get them going. And then when their manager went, they said to me, would you become the manager of the insurance company? And the wages were so much better then than teaching. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And again, it was a great learning curve, you know. Then you had agents; they were sort of self-employed, if you like, and you had to recruit and train and get them out. And yeah, it was a great learning experience. And then when I came up here, I was in at Colonial Mutual, and yeah, that was a great time because we. What we did, they actually sponsored the club, you know, and yeah, we had, I mean, it was very much rugby based round here, even with the insurance. I mean, lads like John Mitchell, Kiwi Sarank, people like that came and worked for Colonial Mutual, you know, and, you know, really enjoyed working with them, you know.
Did you run a football store or something?
Yes.
Precursor to the soccer shop?
Yes, yeah.
Can you explain your
Well, when I finished
your own training brand that you set up through?
Yeah, I had a thing, Sportsline Marketing, and I had what I did was I was the first one to bring in English football shirts, that sort of thing, and also I started to produce my own Umbro shirts because they were the big thing. But then a mate of mine rang me up and said, you're not allowed to do that, you know, because wind's getting. So in the end, I couldn't do it. And so I started Sportsline. But if you see it, it's copied a lot of the Umbro type things, like the shorts. You'd have like black shorts, but a white strip all the way round. But the people who were making them made them too big, so it was almost like a skirt, you know.
They were like Muay Thai shorts.
Yeah.
No, but the brand there was Umbro Pro Training was the brand that he was initially ripping up. And then in his genius Del Boy mode, he came up with Pro Soccer Pro Training. And basically instead of the diamond shape, it was a circle. It was just like a really shit rip-off.
Yeah.
But then the classic the story was when the soccer shop got broken into, because again, classic you went to the cheapest unit at Collingwood Core and there was no proper security. When it got broken into, all the football shirts, Adidas stuff, everything got pillaged, football boot. And the only thing still on the hangers was the Pro Soccer Pro Training gear.
Yeah.
But the thieves are basically like,
yeah.
what's this shit? We're not taking this.
That's right. They went, oh, yeah, Umbro, Adidas, yeah, what's this shit? And they not only left it, they'd thrown it in the corner. And you know, it's like, this ain't worth stealing. You know.
Was there a good story about Bunsey working at that shop?
Oh, no, well, that was one of the reasons that in the end I packed it in, because I gave Bunsey a job as running it, you know, as the salesman. Big mistake. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's not the best of salesmen in that respect.
But he did back you when you left Waikato United, I think. Broke into Muir Park and did he spray paint?
Yeah, bring back Rog.
And Kevin Pooley.
Yeah.
There you go. So he had your back.
Yeah.
Just on that as well, because this will give a little insight into the nature of Dad. Very entrepreneurial, innovative, with not always the same follow through. So the soccer shop, for example.
What was it called?
The soccer shop.
It was called the soccer shop.
The soccer shop. Yeah. You know, there was a niche, but didn't probably follow through on enough. Fell away. He had this idea in the early 90s for people would get a list of groceries, they could tick them, and then send it in, and someone would do the shopping and drop it around. Click and collect.
For your time.
40 years earlier. But,
Yeah.
and this is the classic, like, my mum's like, oh, okay, like, how is it going to go from the supermarket to the people? Like, yeah, you'll go down and do the shopping for them, love. Like, just no real thought, didn't follow it through. The soccer planner, early OOs, internet's just taken off, an online soccer planning tool, plan sessions, this. But again, Del Boy here, get the local part-time cheapest man ever, who used a couple of immigrant workers to do it, and did a shoddy job, and it never took off. 10 years later, soccer planners everywhere, but so always had, like with the soccer shop, genius entrepreneurial ideas without the follow through to actually make you millions.
Amazing. Rod, you've been quite an outspoken member of the football community over the years, and you've had a number of, I don't know, run-ins, fallouts with New Zealand football. What can you recall? What's been your biggest gripe or biggest problem with the people who run New Zealand football over the years and currently?
Well, the big problem with New Zealand football is it's all about politics. So there's people get in there to run the game who've actually had no experience of actually running a club. You know, they've no experience. They have different motivations to get in. I don't know why, to make themselves look good, and also they can't think logically about the game. You see, the game changes. You look at the game in England in the 80s and now what it is with the Premier League and how the competitions have changed and how actually the UEFA competitions have become more and more important, you know, in alongside it. They don't even think in those terms over here. Like, for example, demographics change. So Mount Wellington used to be the strongest club, but that has changed, right? And now you're going to get stronger clubs going up top side of the North Shore. Why? Because that's where people are going to have to go to be housed. And they don't. The club, it's like running McDonald's. You want outlets all over the place, right? I mean, when you look down here, I wonder if any of them are thinking, I'll tell you what, Narrawahi is going to get bigger and bigger. You know, we've got to help them to establish themselves. Cambridge, because people have got an opportunity. Matter. You know, I wonder if any of them say, I tell you what, a couple of years ago they were in the Northern League. Now they've dropped down. I wonder what's happened with them. And I think somebody wrote the other day, Tauranga, because I was over there, is getting massive all over there with Mount Maunganui. Papamoa never existed. But do they help those outlets get better and bigger? No, they don't. All they do is use them to make money. And how often has Football New Zealand really worked on developing administrators? Because, and this is what I found in the game, the people at the top are the most important. They've got to operate properly. If they don't, then the rest below, you've got a problem. And what are the new things that are beginning to come in? Like, for example, at Muir Park, we'd get big crowds because we played in the winter, and in the winter on a Sunday, the other people, the other clubs who were they've got nothing to do, so they come down and watch us. Right now, when it's in the summer, you look at the crowds in the summer, so because you can go to the beach, right? All those sorts of things they don't even sort of look at properly. And
have things got better in 30 years? Are things improving? Or you're probably not as closely connected to it perhaps as you were in the past, but do you think things are moving in the right direction?
If I'm honest, no. Because like I said, they don't train the right people. I mean, the coach education was a lot better then. You had Barry Truman, Jonesy, people with a, and not only were they coach educators, but they did it on the pitch. Truman would win things. Jonesy had worked in, the pro game, so they had real experience to call upon. And also, you think people like John Adzeb, when he had the All Whites to begin with, he wasn't full time. He was working with a club, and then he'd take the team. Now, what I often think is, what is the All Whites coach doing during the day? Because it's a part-time game. What is he doing? Because, how many fixtures have they had in a year?
I asked Anthony Hudson that when I was working the football beat at the Herald. I was like, but what does your day look like when you don't have games for months? Oh, well, I watch a lot of tapes. We watch a lot of film of the players. I'm like, well, I do that as well. Doing the same job. Good stuff.
And what you find is, and that's why, and it's always been the same, and I've always been very naive. I thought it was about coaching, like you said, and achieving things. But it's not. It's about being political. And you find a lot of the coaches, they get in there because they're very clever, very political.
Do you wish, you look back now, you were part of Soccer New Zealand for a while in that role. Do you wish you'd have played the game a bit more to maybe get yourself into a position where you could have really influenced the game in this country? Or would you rather look back and go, I spoke my mind the whole way?
Yeah, well, that was my problem. That's why eventually I went, because I spoke my mind, and the people who were in there didn't like it. But to be fair, I had no aspirations of going into New Zealand football to do the coach education. I was doing it myself. It was because the fella they brought over, Joe McGrath, couldn't do the coach education. So in the end, I was having to take all the courses anyway.
You interviewed for the All Whites job a couple of times, didn't you? Do you think the fact you'd been critical or outspoken hindered your chances of that?
No, well, I was only interviewed once for the All Whites job, but I was actually asked to do it. You see, John Adzard, if you read his book, when I was at Napier, John said that he'd like me as his assistant. But because I was down at Napier building them up, I didn't want to go out of that. And and possibly him and Kevin Fallon were a better mix, because Kevin was, and John was a good man manager, So, and then it did come up again, and I was shortlisted, went for the interview, and no, I just think there were one or two people on there who didn't really want me to take it, So, but everything. Possibly if I had done it, I wouldn't have gone over to England, wouldn't have been with John Cartwright doing that bit at Crystal Palace and then at West Brom, So, as Sam always says, even with the Auckland City, I was a bit bitter at the time, but everything happens for a reason. And those other experiences have, made me, sort of thing. So,
I found it really interesting. Like, a lot of what's been said, a lot of what's happened, you two could switch seats and it's almost exactly the same journey. Yeah. It's so fascinating how close, and even your mannerisms, even the things you say are literally,
I don't know what you're talking about.
the things that Sam says. It's such a I think a really cool thing. But you've obviously, Sam, absorbed a hell of a lot over your 35 years? 37 years? I forgot you're 1 year older than me.
Yeah, I have 100%. Probably not all deliberately, just it's hard not to. Like I said, my childhood was following you around football sessions and football games. So subconsciously I picked up mannerisms. I have people
We joke.
Yeah, but I have people that played under you who maybe haven't seen me in many years and then watch me coach and go, oh my God, you're so like your dad, you know what I mean? Which, yeah, I always think we're quite different, but yeah, there's 100% there's mannerism. And it is funny how even, well, I always thought I was a little bit more rational and calm. The outspokenness and the falling out with people, the older I've got, it's followed suit. But I think what I take from Dad, or what I'm learning to take, is that I probably place a greater value now on actually staying true to what I believe and speaking my mind than compromising that to get somewhere. And I think that's probably a reflection of you and probably a reflection of John Cartwright, who was my other sort of big coaching influence. It's probably no surprise that I've been outside the tent a lot of times with national bodies and things, because my two influences were constantly outside the tent and, you know, speaking their mind. So,
well, I mean, Cartwright, he was at Arsenal as coach. Don Howe was sacked. They offered him the job, but he said no. Don brought me in here. If you're sacking him, I go with him. Now, not many people would do that.
No.
You know, so.
How's your first podcast experience been, Rog? We've made it through nearly 2 hours. Time flies, eh?
I thought we'd only just started. I've got some other stories for you.
Got some jokes ready to go.
It was all right, apart from the fact that I was like, yeah, I've had a sore throat, and you know,
But I didn't pick up on that.
Oh, didn't you? Oh, good.
Shay, are we doing anything else that we need to touch on?
Nah, list is ticked off. Got through everything. Oh, only other thing was, actually no, there was one thing, and you can confirm whether this happened or not, but there were sightings of you running around Hillcrest in a rubbish bag with socks on your hands. Is that a true story? Did that really happen?
Yes.
What, can you explain the theory behind?
No, well, what I'd do is I wouldn't have the rubbish bag where people could see them.
well, there were times.
I'd put the rubbish bag on and then put my top and shorts on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was to keep me warm and get me sweating. And also,
You couldn't wait for a fight?
no, and because I'd seen again, they'd done that. I think
Rocky.
boxers had done it. You know, because it was good for making you sweat. But also, I'd have socks on my hands because I didn't have any gloves, and I wanted to keep my hands warm. So I'd just put a pair of socks on my hands. And can I say that is economically a very good thing. It saves a lot of money on gloves, I can tell you.
There was that. There was, yeah, just to give an insight into, again, the uniqueness of you as a person. To add to that, there was the phase. Do you remember you used to do your, like, unweighted arm exercises? A series of different, like, hand motions as you would walk. To the point where, yeah, I know, to the point where, like, my mum and me at the supermarket would be like, yeah, we saw Roger down the Scott Park flailing his arms around. Like, is he okay? Was he signalling for help? And just, yeah, that was always you. No bother about what people thought if you had your mindset on it.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Rog. That has been a great chat.
Well, it's
Yeah, really enjoyed learning more about things that I didn't know about you, someone who I know quite well. So thank you for joining us.
reminding me of some of the things from the past. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surely we've got to finish with a gag.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
Your best current
best
gag
gag.
on a global audience. It's freezing up now, isn't it?
Well, did I tell you about that Irishman I interviewed for a job?
No.
Yeah, I interviewed this Irishman for a job. I said, I want somebody who can think outside the square. He said, I can think outside the square. So I said, well, illustrate a number without actually writing the number down. So he said, give me that paper.
He's a pirate, is he?
And he did a big fuzzy bit at the top and then 2 sticks coming down from the fuzzy bit. I said, what number's that? He said, number 3. Number 3. So I said, well, can you do a bigger number? He said, of course I can. He went outside and got some mud and rubbed it on it. I said, what are you doing? He said, dirty tree. Dirty tree. So I said, well, can you do fractions or decimals? He said, of course I can. He went outside and got some dog's muck and rubbed it on it. I said, what are you doing? He said, dirty 3 and a turd.
Ladies and gentlemen, Roger Wilkinson.